Hey, hello, this is Sean Dorf from the podcast Thrive, Not Survive After Child Abuse with episode 37. Yesterday was episode 36, obviously, right? And we talked about the search for love. It's still a search, so to speak, right? I started to introduce a little bit of topic about how abuse victims struggle with love, and not saying that we are unique in that way of struggling with love, but typically because trust is very much violated, and other reasons why it's a little bit harder for abuse victims to either believe or just to actually are able to come to a fulfilling loving and relationship. Sometimes we think it is, and then we hit some roadblocks and stuff like that. So I'll come back to that topic. Listen to it if you want to make a start with it, so to speak, right? As you know, and you have followed this podcast for a while, it's I just launch all these different topics, and then they catch up, and then I'm not sure if that's the right approach. By the way, I will find the right approach if this is not the right approach. But today, actually, I called my podcast. I don't always do that. Have a title for the podcast before I actually start recording it. Normally, I talk and then I'll get the title. But in this case, I have it. It's a cry for help. It's a cry for support, and it's also the foundation why I started this podcast. I sometimes get so caught up in the topics that I want to talk to you about, and things that I maybe want to teach, or just want to share information about, that I sometimes maybe forget what this podcast is about. This podcast is called Thrive Not Survive After Child Abuse, and is actually a bit is has it's the goal, so to speak, to empower child abuse victims, right? And the teaching that I do, hopefully that empowers them. And if you're not a victim, by the way, you can still listen to it, and hopefully you get some good takeaways from this as well. But more so, if you're not a victim, I want to create a stronger awareness how big the number is of abuse victims, if you didn't know that, and also give you a stronger insight what the impact is on a person's life when they went through child abuse, or maybe later another form of abuse as well, right? But this podcast is mostly geared to about child abuse, and then maybe a little bit more general sexual abuse. So so I have this goal with this podcast, is to raise the awareness of it, and then give people information what the impact could be. I try to do that always through stories and other means, but that's the goal. The other goal I have, of course, is to empower. I said it already, empower child abuse victims. But last but not least, that's the overall goal, is actually I hope to bring the number of sexual abuse victims down. Now, I'm not sure if a podcast by itself can do that. But don't underestimate yourself, right? It is actually people like you who can actually grab that power and use power in a positive way, and help me to bring that number of child abuse victims down. Now, you could have the same question as I so often had in my mind, saying, do all these things that I do they truly have an impact on that number of child abuse and sexual abuse in the world? To be honest, I don't know that. I sometimes think that one person is pretty insignificant to do that. But if there are many one person, so to speak, right? If that would be good English, then maybe we have an impact. But at the other hand, we sometimes see that one person can have a huge impact in these movements, and it always starts with one person. Any movement starts with one person, or at least a very small group of individuals. And if you look at these individuals, of that group of individuals, you typically find also that one person actually started it all. And in this case, it's not about the accolades. Seriously not. Although no matter how much I like accolades, that is definitely, I'm the first one to admit it. It's not about the accolades. No, I wrote a book. It became a dance seller. Yeah, there was a little bit of ego involved, and I admit that. I'm very proud that I did it. But the goal has always been the same, whether it's through a book or whether it's through podcast, whether it's through Facebook Live, whether it's through Instagram Live, the goal is always the same. I just try to reach different sets of audiences, so that to make that as broad as possible. And so if you are, even if you're one listener, if there's only one listener, and you think, I'm not sure if the podcast always is so good, but at least it stands for a good goal, then I would definitely ask you, please share this with other people. Yeah, share this with other people. Think about yourself, what you could do from your position to make this stop, right? Unless you think it shouldn't stop, right? I mean, I know that's not a nice way to say. I should maybe say that differently, because I know that many people just they feel that I have to do that, but they just, they feel they are more in to support another cause, and that should be good too. I just, for me, it's sometimes so mind-boggling, because that number is so big, right? We're talking about 600,000 new victims every year in the US and Europe together, and that's, we sometimes think that's the whole world, but that's not even 1 billion people, right? That is like, I don't know, 550 million in Europe and 350 in the US or something. That's 900 million people, and that's a big thing. But that is barely a tenth of the world population that I'm talking about, right? I mean, it would be amazing if I could reach those, but that's 600,000. So if you could multiply this, say that is 1/10 of the world population, right? If I would multiply this, that's a scary number. And we're talking about 6 million victims every year. And it's not that the other ones were gone, right? It's 6 million on top of the 6 million of last year, on top of the 6 million of the year before. Can you just imagine what it is? And if you imagine what the impact is on the world, if you just think that most child abuse victims, right, they end up being depressed, getting anxiety problems, having relationships problems, and all these kind of things, right? So I dare to say that, the number of divorce is super high. It's super high, right? 1 out of 3, I think it's the number. A lot of sexual abuse victims, specifically child abusers, struggle tremendously with relationship. Often, I mean, I am an example of that. I've been divorced twice already, right? And so I'm not helpful in that number at all. I don't, laughing about it, but it's actually not a joke. Can you just imagine that helping that cause and helping to bring those numbers down, what an impact we would have on society? If you just do, if you are one of the people saying, okay, Jean, I need to know facts, I need to know numbers, I need to know all these kind of things. If you just go with me and just reason out, if you're a very rational thinking person, right? If you think about what the impact is on the productivity in society because of this high number of people who suffer from depression and anxiety, and it's completely outside their control, right? They were abused when they were 7 years old, like me, right? That's when it started. There was nothing in their own choice that made that happen, right? If we, for some reason, could bring that number down, can you just imagine what an impact that would be on society? Could you even, I mean, okay, maybe I'm getting a little bit crazy today, but can you imagine what the global impact could be if we would bring that number down? Now, you could immediately say, throw your hands in the air, stop maybe even listening to this podcast now, then I'm now completely alone. You could say, oh man, John, this is going on for many years already, it will not stop. But, I mean, many people who did great things, if they would have stopped doing what they believed in to do, it would really stop, right? So I refuse to do that. Next week is my birthday. Not this Monday, but coming Monday I will be 60 years old. I am more on fire about this topic than ever, right? So I might not be the best spokesperson for this, but I think I'm a pretty damn good one, right? So excuse me for my French, right? You know what? Because I was a victim, and I believe this needs to change, and I believe that we can change it, and it took me a while to really see how we can change it. I just see that if we connect this on a higher level and we bring this down, we bring the energy of those people that have let's say, I'm not saying we're all, I mean, I'm not negative loaded anymore, but I used to have that, right? I know what it is. Once I started to tell my story to the world, there's a lot of positivity that came out of me. I start to feel that I am more productive and have more contribution in life than I had before. Can you imagine if more people do that? That they are hindered now, that they may be too shy, or they have a lot of shame, or they feel guilty about things. That's the reason why they don't step forward in life and do the contribution that they actually want to do. Can you imagine if we could help them to do that, what the impact would be on the world? Just imagine that for a moment. That, my dear people, is my cry for help. That is my cry for help. Now, how can you support us? I mean, I think you can support us just by listening to this already and get other people to listen to the same thing. And maybe I'm trying to say the same thing over and over again. But I promise you, I try to fill this podcast also with other things that are maybe just useful and, good to listen to, or maybe even funny at times, right? I don't know, but let's never forget, and maybe I should make a habit of it to say every 10th episode or something and call it a cry for help or something, that is actually the goal of this podcast. There's nothing else. If I would be able to send this message out every day, I have to record only one podcast and do that over and over again, but I don't think I will have any listeners. And that's the point. We want to hear new things, but I don't have any new news for you. Guys, I don't know why I get emotionally over it, but that is the sad story. There is no new news on this. It's maybe news if there is an actor, he's coming forward, that he was an abuse victim too, then it makes the newspaper. But the news is actually that it's going on every day. It's 1,440 new victims every day. If that's not news, I don't know what news is, people. But that's the point, right? Why is it that it has to be something that we can that we can build news around, right? So that's why this podcast is there. This podcast is there maybe because there is no news. It's going on and on. It's like the rotation of the earth. It won't stop, right? But we can make it stop. Not the rotation of the earth, obviously, right? But we can make it stop for a big part, right? If we start to support victims who want to come forward with their story, if we start to support empowering women, which are by far the biggest group of people who are, victims, if we start to help men like myself, like I was myself, I'm still a man, but how I thought about certain things, how we need to change the objectification of women, for instance. If we finally can start, banning porn out of society, if we can change all that, we can, right? I know some of these things are big industry and under the under the flag of, we need to live in total freedom. A lot of things can be in the world that I think should actually not be in the world. And I'm not meaning to immediately make a law against it, right? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if we change the mindset around this topic drastically, which is possible, absolutely possible, right? There are bigger things that we have changed as human beings around things, right? There was a time that we not believed that the earth was round, that it was not, it was flat. There was a huge conceptual change. A lot of people don't even understand the proof of it, how we can prove that the world is a globe, right? But we believe it now. So a lot of things, we can change the mindset on things as long as we work for it, right? And if you go with me a little bit into that maybe more metaphysical side of this story, that we can change the energy of a really big part of the population, that could make a big change in many things. That surely could be. It could be a one-by-one person battle, but we can also try to address it to another side. That's why I do a podcast, right? So if you're with me on this, if you're with me on this quest, or at least you want to give me the support on this quest, or give me at least the benefit of the doubt that I'm a good spokesperson for this, then pay it forward. Share this podcasts with other people. You want to go a step further, you can go to Amazon.com and get a book, Broken Silence, a copy. The proceeds of the book, they go to a non-profit organization that's called Dance's Movement to Stop Sexual Abuse, right? But by that, it's not about the money in this case. The money helps, trust me. But the story itself has already proven that it helps people. So if you yourself are a child abuse victim or a victim of sexual abuse, I promise you, I will give you the money back of the book. If it's not true, this book will help you forward in life, right? I wrote it, for a big part, it has been an inspiration from whatever source that was. I believe it's coming from God, but that's why I wrote it. That's why I put it out there. So pick up a copy. In a week or so, we're doing a campaign where we give away free copies. We only ask for the shipping and handling. And so you can wait for that too, or just write me an email right now and I'll do the same thing to you. Send me the shipping and handling, and I'll send you a free copy of the book. So we can make the same deal there. But it can start as simple as listening to this podcast. So I'm repeating myself a lot this time, which I think I should, because maybe it was not really clear why this podcast was there. But this podcast is there to do that, right? To finally try to find a way to stop sexual abuse, because it's one of the bigger problems in the world. It seriously is. Just think about the numbers. 6 million is my estimate every year. 6 million, from which is a big part children, right? And we're still talking about that 70 to 75% goes unreported, at least in the US and Europe. So that would quadruple this number very quickly. I mean, that's just a number I don't even want to call out what that means, right? Because then it's 25% that's known. So if that number would be higher, it's an estimate. I mean, then in Europe and the US alone, we have 2.4 million people. Now do that times 10, and I think we get an almost unbelievable number. And because that number is so unbelievable, sometimes we throw our hands in the air and say we should not do something about it. I know, and it's a very, and there's no pun intended behind it. I know it's not a very sexy subject to talk about sexual abuse, right? But if you are a victim, and it's very likely if you're one of my listeners, right? You can do something about it. It's not only the other people that need to do something about it. If you're a victim, you can do something about it too. If you don't know exactly what, then write us an email and we'll help you through that. Start by reading the book Broken Silence. Forward this message and find me definitely on my own website if you want to, jeandorf.com, right? Or a Dance's Movement to Stop Sexual Abuse, right? All right, this was Jean with the podcast Thrive Not Survive After Child Abuse. This was episode 37. Tomorrow we're going to do episode 38 with a different topic. I promise you I will repeat this message a few times. So if you are already on board, you can skip it the next time. I probably call it every time a cry for help, right? This was Jean. Thank you for listening, and I hope to hear you tomorrow. Bye-bye.